I'm Tiffany Nielsen for Industry Insights Webinars Interviews, and I'm here today with Dr. Joe Perez. Joe, how are you doing?
Hi, Tiffany. I'm doing all right, thanks. Hope you are too, ma'am.
And I'm so glad you could join us. And Joe is going to be talking to us about the dark web. But before we dive into that, Joe, can you tell us just a little bit of background about yourself and what you're currently doing?
After a 10-year career as an educator, my focus shifted to IT in the early 1990s when I went to work at NC State University. Over the next 25 years, I rose through the ranks from computer consultant to computer training manager to analyst programmer to business intelligence specialist. Then in 2017, I was recruited away from the university by some really awesome people at the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. I mean, they made me an offer I couldn't refuse. It was a major promotion and best move I've ever made, both for my career and, more importantly, for my family. After another promotion, I'm now Senior Systems Analyst and Team Lead at DHHS, where besides all the cool tech stuff I get to do, I get to liaise between business and technical people to analyze, negotiate, and implement viable transformational solutions in data warehousing that everybody can be satisfied with. Now, besides my full-time leadership role at DHHS, I became Chief Technology Officer at Solentech Corporation in October 2020. That's an award-winning startup company that was recently named as a top 10 healthcare security solutions provider. I'm really proud of that. Now, with all that going on, I stayed pretty busy, but I love what I do.
Well, we're so glad that you could join us today. And so what is the dark web and when did it start? Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. Well, many people might not realize that the dark web has actually been around just about as long as the internet itself. It might not necessarily have been called the dark web, way back then. But if the technology is available, all right, picture it this way. If the technology is available for people to use for communication, research, experiments, and all that kind of thing, with the all overriding commonality of collaboration, right? The fact of how easy this new technology, well, new at the time, would make collaboration, well, you can be sure that it's going to attract people who would use it for things that they'd want to keep a secret, okay? As opposed to things that they would want to share as widely as possible. So with that in mind, and if memory serves correctly, the first time that anybody sold anything online was in the early 1970s. Now, what did they sell? It was a group of students at Stanford who were selling cannabis to students at MIT. Imagine that, I mean, the first ever online sale, and it was for marijuana of all things. Now, of course, back then, not many people knew about it because, well, hardly anybody had PCs. They wouldn't be invented for another few years. For that matter, there was no internet access in anybody's houses. I mean, it was just a higher ed, research, and military thing back in those days. It wasn't even called the dark web, as I said, or any other kind of web. It was all done within what used to be called Arpanet back then. And as the legit web, or the surface web, grew and came into its own, so did the dark web, getting a big boost back in the 1990s when peer-to-peer file sharing, both legal and illegal, mostly illegal, became such a big deal. But I suppose if I were to define the dark web, I'd say it this way. It's the part of the internet not accessible by regular browsers where people who run it and use it can stay pretty much untraceable and totally anonymous. Or you might say it this way. Untraceable anonymity between endpoints using an environment that's intentionally hidden from search engines. How's that?
That's great. Thank you so much for that explanation. And
Sure.
what would you say that its growth is continuing, or has it kind of hit its plateau?
Well, let me tell you, um, a report published by a Bitcoin tech company a few months ago said that the value of Bitcoin trading increased by more than 340% since 2017. All right. That same report went on to say that the bandwidth capacity of the Tor browser used to access the dark web has increased sixfold to more than 500 gigabits per second. It's the haven of choice for those who would like to specialize in ransomware attacks and other things. Now, while that may pale in comparison to other transactional and capacity related statistics that you can pull up about the surface web, the dark web is relatively small compared to the light web, or we'd call it the surface web instead, as it's commonly called. And yeah, there are claims that the dark web might actually be decreasing in size, but still, regardless, let me stress something. We cannot afford to underestimate its danger, all right? Big or small, growing or shrinking, the exact numbers to the average person should be pretty much irrelevant. What is relevant, what is important, is to recognize that its impact is disproportionately huge, especially when considering that it only takes a small group of hackers using the dark web to take down multi-billion-dollar legit companies. And, unfortunately, there are just too many examples these days to name.
Well, that was going to be my next question, Joe. Besides the typical unmentionables, such as selling cannabis online, what are some of the other ways that the dark web is used?
Yeah. Well, it doesn't have to be a nefarious thing. I mean, the way, I guess, if you want to know how to access the web, the dark web, it's not limited by our knowledge, but by how it's accessed. I hinted at it earlier. You can't get to the dark web by using your run-of-the-mill conventional internet browser, right? You can't just Google it. You have to use a special type of browser. I guess more accurately, you can call it a private internet browsing network. The most popular tool of choice is a thing called Tor, T-O-R, that stands for the onion router of all things. A fun fact about Tor, that the people who created it, the developers and so forth, they had good intentions to begin with. All they wanted to do was create an environment where people could browse online freely and anonymously. I mean, little did they know that it would open the floodgates to all kinds of criminal activity that goes on there. But to your point, it's not just criminal activity. I personally would never want to take a chance with using the dark web myself. I mean, I would use the incognito mode on my regular browser if I wanted to be anonymous and do anonymous research. Oh, no, I'm asking for a friend here. I'm not asking for my, yeah, right. But seriously, there are indeed legitimate, legal uses, justifiable uses, okay? In the definition I gave earlier, at the outset to your earlier question, so I didn't say a single word about it being either good or evil, right? I just said that it was a restricted access platform on which people can be anonymous and untraceable. Now, does a bunch of illegal, nefarious, illicit stuff go on? Oh, yeah, absolutely, without a doubt. But there are legitimate needs for anonymity. For instance, a June 2020 article for the U.S. Department of Justice said that its highly secure communication channels, what's found in the dark web, those highly secured communication channels can shield classified government activity. And also, they protect people like journalists and human rights activists from their oppressive regimes and, whatever countries that they're from, or whomever it is that they're trying to serve or protect or warn. And speaking of warn, for that matter, whistleblowers. A whistleblower who needs a platform, a pulpit, whatever you want to call it, okay, a platform from which to shout out these warnings, would feel they need to be able to do so securely and anonymously without being afraid of getting discovered and or, whatever punishment may come his or her way. So yeah, when you are in one of these situations that I just described, you do need a means, a tool, if you will, that guarantees those two tenets, anonymity and untraceability. And when you take out all of the evil stuff associated with the dark web, and of course, there is plenty of it, too much. We've talked about that, and other people talk about it too. And if you just think about it just in its functional aspects, all right, that's all it is. It is just a tool. And just like any other tool, well, it can be used for either good or bad or evil, a chainsaw. You don't have to massacre people by dismembering. A chainsaw can be used to cut down a tree. Right? So all kinds of tools can be good or bad. Unfortunately, though, with this particular tool, human nature being what it is, things that are that secret, things that are that hidden, things that provide you with that much anonymity and untraceability, take it to the extreme, well, that's just begging for trouble. That's just asking for problems. That's going to draw out all kinds of bad actors, as they're called, who want to exploit it for their own illegal, illicit, self-serving purposes. So, yeah, it can be productive. But I still say one word to sum it up: beware. Beware and beware. I guess that's 3 words, but it's the same word: beware.
Well, thank you so much, Joe. And if we could close out with maybe just one final tip you have for securing your data, what would that be?
Well, I would tell people the same thing that Ra's al Ghul, or Ra's al Ghul, however you pronounce it, told Batman in the Batman Begins movie. Mind your surroundings, Mr. Bruce. Okay, we need to be aware of what's going on. Cybersecurity is not just the responsibility of the CISO or the person who has all the training, who has the CMMC certification and all that kind of stuff. They say that a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. Do not click on that link. Do not click on that phishing attempt. You may not think it's that. That prince in Abu Dhabi offering you 27,000, or 800 million or whatever dollars to take care of his bank account. If it's too good to be true, it probably is, and you're just asking for trouble. Mind your surroundings. Be aware of what's going on. Don't fall for the bait of anything that looks like it's either too good to be true or not enough to be true. Watch what you're doing and take personal responsibility for your own actions. Don't wait for somebody else to clean up your mess. Clean it up yourself, and don't even get in the mess in the first place. Watch what's going on.
Thank you so much.
Beware. Yeah, there we go. Be aware and beware. Those 2 things.
Thank you so much, Joe. And I find that very informational, and I hope our audience does too. And if they wanted more information about you or to contact you for some of their data security needs, how would they contact you, Dr. Joe?
Sure. Best way is to reach me by LinkedIn, linkedin.com/n/JW Perez, or look me up on my Sessionize page at sessionize.com/Joe-Perez. And one last one, my personal website, which is drjoeperez.com.
Well, again, thank you so much, Dr. Joe, and we look forward to having you on more editions of our Industry Insights webinar series. So thanks again.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. It was an honor.
Thanks. Have a great day.